Thelb Karu by Conway Fitzgerald. Part 1. Fall of the House of Karu. Many centuries ago, the known world was home to many more high elves, of many different race types, skin shades, and disparate homelands. The elves were the silent immortals, hidden away from the rest of the known world to protect their very long lives. After the arrival of humankind, an era of great peril was thrust upon all the elves. It was not believed to be because of the existence of men at first. The humans were seen as capable allies against the chaotic horde that had been unleashed upon them. Humans were also quite numerous and shared a hatred of the horde's orcs and their giant masters. Though as the millennia passed, the High Elves, despite their longevity, were decreasing in number drastically. All over the known world, there were new, fatal, and debilitating diseases affecting them all the time. Despite their ancient knowledge of the healing arts, these new maladies were increasingly difficult to diagnose, let alone cure. Thereafter, it was determined that family lines, or faulty genetics, was what most high elves believed to be the principal cause of these new ills. That is why selective procreation and partnering of genders was such an important and carefully nurtured step for them. All the while, both humanity as well as the dreaded horde expanded their wanton populations in every direction. It was at that time Thelb Karu was born at Mirdet Chenu, the mountainous castle city keep within the untraveled endless wood. The hidden city's name meant first home of the elves. It was the heart of the high elves' power and contained the majority of their remaining populace. To have and hold a lasting place within its walls was considered amongst the greatest of achievements for a gray mountain elf to aspire to. Thelb was also born a member of a highly respected family of high elves, with a traceable history of health and success in both business and procreation, and a reputation of fair dealings among others. These traits were considered the most desirable for elevation within the aristocracy of the Mirdet Chenu. All high elves wanted to be closer to the center of the city and its power. Alongside its awesome financial power, ancient healing knowledge and martial wisdom prevailed unlike anywhere else in the known world. Like Thelb Karu, Usiwaie Valtir was all of those things, born of a powerful house of high elves within the city center. But unlike Thelb, she was also very beautiful and was considered the most desired mating partner for any male of stature within the great elven city. Usiwaie and Thelb came of age together, so of course, Thelb coveted her greatly. They were both still many years from the time of mating, but deep down, Thelb's greatest desire was for her to be promised to him. Though despite his family's wealth and power, he knew how unlikely that was. She was a truly beautiful female, very rare among the Grey, known more for their intelligence and stoic acumen than for glamour. Thelb had chosen her because within his mind, he wore her face. That was a common sensation among aspiring elvish lovers, to think of themselves with the face of their mate they had chosen. All of their reactions and expressions could be seen internally through the face of the one they loved. This trained their mind to forget its sense of self and prepare for the creation of a shared face with the next generation of high elves.
You have nearly graduated school and must join the adulthood. Become part of the city's organa. You will have to choose soon, my son,
said Tia Karu, Thelb's adoring mother, as she brushed the long, colorless hair of her only offspring.
Perhaps then you could choose a partner. Mother, please. I am just finishing school. Please don't speak of partnering now,
said Thelb, with visions of Usiwaie prevailing his thoughts secretly.
Well, you must consider these things. Keeping your place at the table within the walls of the Myrdet isn't a given for you, Thelb. It must be earned. Your father may have some ideas,
Ruli said as she finished tying his hair.
He always has ideas,
said Thelb, pulling his mane from her grasp.
As I've told you, Mother, I will pursue magic. That is what I want.
He stood up and headed for his quarters. His mother followed.
Arcane pursuits are unwanted here. You will jeopardize your place, our family's place. There is no need for new mages among the Organa. How can you possibly discover greater healing powers or magic alchemy than that of the masters like Zalfin and Pelican? You have such little faith in me, Mother. I will go with Lassiter to Chalpachari and learn to be the greatest magi at the true school of magic, the Armish Doa. You will do no such thing,
Theb's father, the great Thelb Karu, replied as he entered the room.
Leaving this city to educate outside is the most foolish idea you've yet had,
he said, as his many servants helped him to remove his business attire.
The time has come for the elevation of our house, young Thelb. That is your duty,
his father insisted.
Father, a long life of counting coins and fending off conniving dwarves is not my idea of elevation. You know very little, young Thelb. Clearly, you've learned very little of what it means to be where you are, or what it took to get you here,
his father retorted. What his father said was true. Thelb knew it to be so. All of this space and affluence that surrounded him within the House of Karu was situated near the very center of the ancient city. The huge house was never empty. Its many halls and rooms were always filled with foreign servants and scheming sycophants looking for favors. Thelb was wise to what was required to maintain this kind of life, yet he was certain this was not the life he desired. At that time, a wealth-securing career was irrelevant to him. The dream of pursuing the arcane arts was his greatest inspiration, one he shared with his best friend, Lassiter. They were both brilliant students, considered the most astute of their class, and only the study of the mystic arts seemed worthy enough to challenge them intellectually.
Thelb, I promise, I will teach you everything,
said Lassiter. Though Lassiter was also from a family with a place within the walls, he was from a much smaller, outside house, a lower rung of the hierarchy, near the very outskirts of the Myrdet.
If you have this kind of opportunity, you really can't pass it up. Thelb, one day, you could be elected our sovereign.
Thelb waved off his talk of politics.
But to get out of this place, to see the world, I envy you, my friend,
Thelb said.
I've heard the Master Parabsiem has the power to fly without wings and make himself invisible to the eye,
Lassiter claimed.
If you learn that, you must show me,
Thelb demanded. Lassiter left soon thereafter. Unlike Thelb, who was forced to remain, Lassiter escaped the race for political elevation within the Myrdet and traveled off to the distant island of Chalpachari to study at the school of the Archmagi. the Armesh Doa. Armesh Doa was Elvish for House of Brothers, for at one time the entire island was only populated by the elves. Here, separated from the rest of the known world, they built the school and library dedicated to the pursuit of the arcane arts. Yet just as the dwarves gifted mankind with the secrets of the forge and the power of steel, so too did the elves share their secrets of magic with humanity. Though over the last millennia, the island of Chalpachari itself had become overrun by humans, and now only a small minority of elves remained. The humans allowed the elves of the Armesh Doa to remain, so that they could learn more of the powers they had discovered. Among the few remaining elves within was Parab Siem, the Arch-Magi, fabled to be over 1,500 years old. Despite many hardships, Lassiter would reach the Armesh Doa, and he was later added to that small remaining elvish sprig of magical life. How greatly Thelb envied him, for in the years after, he never traveled outside that city. He was a prisoner of affluence, forced to learn the ways of commerce and population control from his father. Though Thelb showed tremendous acumen for trade and skill for control. Therefore his own personal entourage grew steadily, as did his power within the Mirdet. His father, Therat, was very proud, but it was not the love and admiration of his father Thelb craved, but that of Usiwaie Valtir. Her family was also growing in power and prestige, and as she grew into womanhood, the anticipation of her time of mating was growing in all male minds of the court, especially the king himself. Though the sovereign Pathram Zet coveted the fair Usiwaie not for himself, but for his young son, Otharam. Otharam was still centuries from his own age of procreation, so many felt they still had the opportunity to win her affections. Among the very few gray males who would ever stand a chance of becoming her mate was Thelb himself. But another suitor from an upstart family named Tarko Benai seemed much more to her fancy. He was beautiful, like her, and a gifted public speaker, something Thelb avoided. Tarko had nurtured a growing friendship with the House of Zet, and to the sovereign's throne, a seat Thelb might someday take. That still seemed possible, until his father Therat grew ill. It started as a mild, yet unexplained cough. Thelb Karu did not smoke or drink, or take any chances with his health, so when the cough lingered, suspicions grew among the court that perhaps Therat was not well. Upon inspection by the highest health officials, he was found to have a mysterious lump in his throat. This was the sign of a genetic illness, or perhaps worse, a disease of contagious nature. In what seemed a blink of an eye, the House of Zet demanded the removal of Thelb Karu and his family from the center of the city to protect the populace. Soon after, Therat was removed from his important postings and powerful administrative duties. Within a year, the Karu family was ostracized from the court entirely. Their large mansion was seized, and they were moved outside of the city walls. Nearly every member of the extended Karu family had vanished from sight soon thereafter. Thelb and his mother Ruliar were left alone in a futile attempt to tend to Therat until he died. There was no celebration of his great life. Therat had done so much to promote wellness, good living, and prosperity within the Mirdet. He was among the sovereign's most trusted counselors and friends. But now, no one within the House of Zet would speak of him or his death. Erasing him from their memory was as important as removing the infection they believed he had caught. Thelb and his mother were no longer allowed inside of the city for fear that they too might spread the sickness that befell Thelb Karu. The two only had each other and an uncertain destiny. Thelb's heart was broken. He felt so betrayed by circumstance. He was unable to feel love for anyone or anything. He could only feel anger and the need for revenge. He feared for the safety of his mother. They had very little money now, no friends, and no prospects for a future. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door of their humble new house. Thelb looked to his mother, who got up to answer. Thelb grabbed hold of an old family heirloom, a bronze dagger he had secreted away. He moved his mother away from the door.
"Let me, Mother,"
Thelb instructed. He cracked open the door carefully and saw a single hooded elf outside the door.
"Who goes?"
Thelb asked menacingly. The stranger removed her hood, revealing the beautiful eyes of Usiwaie Valtir. Her mouth and nose were covered by a silken scarf to protect her from exposure to the sickness the Karus were feared infected by.
"Thelb, it is I, Usiwaie,"
she said, removing her scarf briefly to reveal her immaculate smile.
"I heard, and I am so sorry. The passing of Thorat.
She looked upon Thelb with great concern.
"I am grateful for the thought. You shouldn't be here, Usiwaie, for so many reasons,"
Thelb warned. His mother peered over his shoulder to see who it was, so Thelb maneuvered deftly outside of the door, closing it behind him to keep the conversation as private as possible. The shock on his face bespoke the surprise of this encounter.
Not to worry. No one from the Zet or Valtir. No, I am here."
She said, looking back to a small carriage with a few armed bodyguards waiting beside it, who pretended not to bear witness to this event.
"That is what I mean. You shouldn't be out here. It's dangerous,"
Thelb said, forgetting his own ego and considering instead the safety of the woman who was his greatest aspiration. Before he could convince her to leave, she kneeled to the muddy road and pulled a small box from a leather bag she was carrying under her cloak. She arose and handed the box to Thelb.
"Please, take this. I wish I could do more."
Thelb would not take the box from her.
"Usiwaie, I am grateful, but your concerns are unwarranted. I will be fine,"
Thelb said, as Ruli peered out of the window at them.
"Thelb, I heard Taco bragging about how, now that your family was disenfranchised, soon you would be next. Taco and his friends, they laughed about your father's death, and how you too would be left with nothing. Then how they would come for you. Please, just take this and leave this city right away. I am afraid it is you that is in danger."
Tarko was Thelb's principal foil for both the role of sovereign as well as the hand of fair Usiwaie.
"I will not leave until you take this. Promise me you will leave the Mirdet."
She demanded. She was becoming very emotional. Though it appeared heavy, Usiwaie continued to hold the box aloft in his direction. Thelb decided accepting her gift might be the only way to end this dangerous conversation before it was too late. They had already attracted the attention of some of the curious village folk. He took the box and hid it behind his back from any onlookers.
"Very well. But please, you must leave this place. You should not be here,"
Thelb said, though deep in his heart, he wished he could tell her anything else. He wished he could take her with him, wherever it was he might go. But instead, before he could say another word, she turned from him and raced back across the muddy road and into the small carriage. She did not look back. The carriage then hustled away. Thelb then re-entered his small village hovel and locked the door behind him.
Who was that?
Ruli asked suspiciously.
She looked as if from the Mirtet, inside the walls.
Thelb turned from her and opened the box. It was filled with gold coins. There was a small fortune inside. Thelb closed the box before Ruli could see what was in it.
Mother, we must leave this place now.
Thelb demanded.
Gather whatever things you still have. Thelb, what are you talking about? We haven't even heard back from the court. We should be getting our housing back within the walls soon. All of our heirlooms will be delivered there.
Ruli was confident that the court would follow through on their promises to restore them both once their quarantine was complete. But what Usiwaie told Thelb rang true, and she took tremendous risk to come outside of the walls without permission and steal money from her father to do so. Thelb was as wise as he was brilliant. Even at this young age, his sense of danger was a true talent.
Father's sickness gave the court all kinds of latitude. They will use it to justify removing our entire estate. They could not. That would be illegal.
Ruli was not persuaded.
Who was that person? What have you been told?
Ruli started parenting him, but Thelb persisted.
Mother, everything we once owned has been confiscated. Next, they will come for our lives.
Thelb said with a steely gaze.
They want us all dead. Impossible. Thelb Karu, you are being ridiculous. We will have everything restored. It is a long life we live. You must learn patience.
Mother, Thelb demanded.
I am not going anywhere.
She insisted. She would not leave. She was convinced that whatever information Thelb had been given was wrong. All of the precious ancient artifacts, the ledgers of coin and jewels, the stockpile of ancient artworks, would soon all reside in a new, albeit smaller home within the walls. She wouldn't dare risk losing that based on a rumor among such inexperienced young adults. Thelb realized that if he remained, he would likely be killed. When Usiwaie spoke of Tarko Benai and shared his rejoicing over Theb's family plight, it all made sense. Tarko was handsome and powerful, but nowhere near as smart as Thelb. He was also devious and untrustworthy. If the Benai and ruling Zet families felt as though the House of Karu was truly a threat to their power, it was logical they would take steps to remove it. Unlike Thelb, his mother Ruli was not witness to the haggling, double-dealing, and nefarious backstabbing that occurred within the power-brokering families of the court. Thelb knew what they were capable of, including murder. But if she would not leave, could he make her? Thelb then made a decision that would change his life forever. He opened the box before his mother and revealed the rolls of gold coin.
Take this,
he said, after removing half of the coins and placing them into a pack he had begun arranging.
If I am right, you can use some of it to bribe away the thugs that are coming. You can use the rest to escape to Chalpachari. That is where I will be, at the Armish Doa, with Lassiter. Thelb, my son, you cannot leave.
She insisted.
If I am wrong, Then I will return and seek you out in your new, restored home, wherever it may be. And you can use the rest of this money to keep me out of jail. Where did you get this money? What have you been told? And by whom?
Ruli demanded answers, but Thelb had made up his mind. His destiny, the one he had envisioned outside of the mere debt, awaited him presently. Though he knew she was in danger, Thelb could not defend them both, since he was the true target of his father's enemies, not her. He surmised his presence here beside her only further endangered her life.
Mother, I must go now. I'm sorry, but this is the way. It must be,
Thelb said, leaving behind his mother and the last trace of his ancient family name to a most uncertain fate. The eastern sea lanes were very dangerous to sail, not just because of the many pirates and privateers looking to rob passenger ships, but for the many giant sea monsters that frequented the warm waters off the coast. Thelb had never been on a ship before that, and became very ill. Elven seacraft were designed to elevate the cabin and react to the moving waves, to keep the cabin mostly stable, whereas the human ships were designed to share every movement of the waves. Thelb could not find one to hire for the voyage. Most elven ships were lost or abandoned centuries ago. His hired crew, whom he could barely afford, laughed at him while he suffered within the boat's cabin. Though these human sailors were quite capable and very experienced, they anticipated the various toll stops along the way and used a portion of Thelb's remaining coin to pay them off and complete the voyage past Array and beyond to the larger autonomous island of Chalpachare. One night, Thelb was awakened by loud bangs on the hull of the ship. He could hear the wood splintering. He could also hear a panic above on deck. The dozen or so crew were working together feverishly to fight off a hungry giant octopus. They were successful, and the ship carried on into the night. In the morning, when Thelb finally came on the deck, he witnessed the enormous carcass of the octopus lying in pieces. The smell of the slaughtered monster caused him to vomit over the side of the craft.
Don't let him fall off. I didn't come all this way just to lose the cargo,
said Parisi, the ship's captain and the principal human guide Thelb had hired to aid his journey to the unknown island kingdom. The crewman pulled Thelb back as a wave crashed into the side of the ship.
My goodness, that elf is even paler than he was before.
They all laughed. Thelb did not. The salty water and intense seasickness had him questioning his ability to survive this, but he did not have to suffer much longer.
There it is, Captain. Chalpachare Island.
The crew moved swiftly as they started preparing the ship for landing, and the activity brought some hope to Thelb that he might survive this ordeal after all. When the vessel finally docked at the port city of Honan, the crew unloaded the giant octopus first. The dock workers were impressed and accepted the carcass for oil, ink, and meat. Thelb couldn't imagine anyone daring to eat such a disgusting creature, but octopus was actually a valuable delicacy on the island. These oceanfarers knew what they were doing. After the business at the dock was complete, Thelb attempted to get to his feet, which were so weak he could not stand by himself, so the crew had to drag him off the ship. They flopped him down on the wooden deck, right beside the glaring eye of the culled sea creature. The monster's eyes seemed to speak to Thelb, to suggest they were now destined for a similar fate. Thelb vomited again, except now there was no more liquid in his body, so he could only manage a series of dry heaves. The captain then found him crawling towards the shore and dragged him up onto his wobbly feet.
Very well. It appears our business is complete. I'll take the other 10 pieces now,
he demanded.
You told me you would escort me to the gates of the Amish door. You can't leave me here. I don't know anyone here. I don't even speak the language.
The deal was 10 pieces for safe travel across human lands. 10 more for safe travel across the southern sea lanes to Chalpachare. We are here. I've done that for you, Elf. Now pay me,
demanded the captain. His first mate and some of his feisty crew members approached to see if the captain required any added violence to ensure payment. Thelb felt so weak and humbled, so vulnerable to these sea scum. He promised himself he would never be taken like this again. But before he could respond, the captain's men grabbed, then stripped Theb's bag from his person and looted all the remaining money and valuables he had on him before allowing him to fall helplessly onto the cold, wet dock.
Pleasure doing business with you, Elf,
the captain said coldly. The crewmen laughed. Theb was now coinless, a strange foreigner left for dead in the strange foreign land. The rest of the crew passed him by excitedly on their way to the bars and brothels. They taunted, spit, and even stepped on Theb's back callously. They laughed, completely unconcerned with whatever may come of the sick, pasty elf they had delivered from the mainland. When Theb finally regained the strength to come to his feet, he walked slowly into the outskirts of the city of Honan. It was a human city, the capital city of Chalpachare, home to the king and his mighty fleet, which preserved his independence from the expansive power of the great Eastern Empire. But Theb's destination, the Arnamesh Doa, lay on the other side of the huge island. Theb was now without money or supplies, so he hid his face under a cloak and began the long 100-mile trek due north. He walked until he fell onto the side of the road, unconscious.
I think he's still alive,
a female voice said.
If he's not dead, he soon will be,
an authoritative male voice responded. Theb could not understand the words being said. He was barely conscious. His painfully chapped lips felt soothing water upon them. His eyes opened to behold a young human woman offering him water from a carafe. She looked at his face as he drank the water. She then noticed his ears.
Father, I believe this is an elf. Look!
She pointed out the unmistakable pointed ears. Elves were now very rare on the island, but their legend here preceded them, so some human residents of the island still held them in high regard. But those types of spiritualists were also very few and far between.
Well, let us not be seen with him, lest we share his fate. Evidently, he's done something wrong.
Father, we cannot simply leave him here.
The young woman insisted.
Scripture says, when you too would be in such time of need, think of those many days you passed the needy by without a thought of...
The father grunted as he leapt off his carriage.
I will likely regret this,
he said. He then pulled the little man up onto his shoulders and then dropped him hastily into the back of the carriage with two of his other younger children. The boy and girl giggled as they poked and prodded Theb the whole way back to their animal farm beside the shore. After feeding him and affording him some much-needed rest, Thelb came to. His stomach was still queasy, though that was most likely because of the strange animal meat these strange humans had fed him. When he was able to walk again, he left the house to find the family at work in the yard. The father noticed him first.
Kelsa, your guest has awoken,
the father said. The young girl dropped the basket she was weaving and headed over to check on Thelb. The smaller children followed behind her.
Hello.
She said with a smile.
My name is Kelsa.
She pointed to her chest.
Who are you?
She asked. Thelb assumed she was attempting to share names, but there was only one name he wished to share.
Armesh Doa,
he said gruffly. Then he repeated it again, more loudly.
Armesh Doa. Your name is Armesh?
The girl asked as her father appeared behind her.
No. He is talking about the Armesh Doa, that house of evildoers up north. The house of the wizards. I knew he was trouble.
Father, perhaps he's simply trying to get back there. Perhaps he is a good wizard.
Give him some water and food to take. Hopefully he won't cast any curses upon us.
The father then confronted them.
Armesh Doa, you want to go there?
The man asked cautiously.
Armesh Doa.
Thelb nodded and spoke several words in a common human tongue of the north they did not understand.
Yes. Do you know the way? I must go there.
The middle-aged man was frustrated.
You must go now. It is that way.
The man pointed to the road leading north.
Armesh Doa,
he said, more forcefully. Thelb was wise to understand what he meant.
I am grateful,
he said in a language they had never heard.
Thank you.
Thelb then turned away from them, and then restarted on the 100-mile trek north to the forbidden home of the arcane. Thelb was very lucky, for the family that saved him were devoutly religious. Their god was one of plenty and also of mercy. So much so, rather than report Thelb's appearance to their local magistrate, as would be expected of them, they simply agreed to keep this chance encounter between themselves, the strange elf, and the watchful eyes of their benign deity. Days later, after avoiding many other dangers along that road, Thelb finally saw the multi-layered roofs and spires of Armesh Doa. He was so emaciated that he could barely make the steady uphill hike that led to its doors. It was a barren road that dizzied him with its steady incline, which seemed to become greater with each step. Thelb staggered to the gatehouse of the ancient wooden stronghold. He pounded his hands against the doors. There was no response. He called out,
Lassiter! I am here!
He yelled out into the sky. He then fainted and collapsed into the sandy ground outside the doors. A few minutes later, the giant doors of the Armesh Doa opened. A young monk, a human servant, exited the walls of the forbidden temple of the Archmagi. He then looked back to another servant behind him on the other side of the massive double doors.
It's alive. I believe it is a mountain elf. Just like the learner, Lassiter.
The young servant boy said in an unfamiliar tongue. But Thelb came to when he heard the name of his closest and really only remaining friend in the known world.
Lassiter!
Thelb whispered out. Theb's nearly lifeless body was then recovered from the steep road by a pack of monk servants and then brought inside the ancient sanctuary. Word got out to Lassiter soon after that a gray elf had arrived at the gates of the Armesh Doa, exclaiming his name. Lassiter shared his meager quarters with several other new learners. Most were human, One other was a mixed-race woman, Havish dwarf and gnome, from the west near Mountain Glow. She was a student of alchemy and the enchantment of weapons. All of the new students were curious to see another elf that looked so similar to their beloved brother Lassiter. He had become a senior pupil, having been there by way of invitation for several years now. Thelb's dramatic and most unexpected arrival was a curiosity to the entire Sanctum's community of 30 resident magic users, the dozen students, about 100 servants, and even the Archmagi himself, the nearly mythical living legend Parab Siem. Parab was the greatest living magic user in the known world. He had lived for over 1.5 millennia. There was no spell, or even concept of one, no power, arcane or godly, that he had yet to witness or investigate, until now. For unlike every other fact or discernible fiction Parab came to know, this gray elf that escaped from the Mirdet was a complete enigma, an unanswerable question, something he had yet to encounter.
"You cannot take him in, Archmagi,"
said one of his master mages, a human from Dresh.
"He was unannounced. He was uninvited. Even the student he claims to know had no knowledge of his coming. He could be wanted. He could bring great danger to our school. That is the last thing we need right now."
Strange new elves on Chalpachare is certain to draw the ire of the king. He has made his meaning plain, Archmagi. There are to be no new immigrations.
Another elder, elvish wizard reminded the Archmagi.
I think we should hear him,
said the Archmagi.
Bring him before me.
Before Lassiter could conjure an explanation for his friend's unexpected arrival, he had been informed that his old friend would be brought before the Archmagi for a hearing. Thelb was already notoriously reticent, and truly gifted at his ability to skirt interrogation. Though Lassiter was aware of what a hearing meant, the Archmagi was a visionary, capable of discerning truths that the subject might not even know about themselves. There was nothing that Thelb could hide from Parab Siem. Lassiter only saw Thelb briefly beforehand. Theb's gruff voice explained his family had been unseated, and his mother was now likely in danger. He needed to leave the Mirdet out of fear for his life. Considering Lassiter had been approved and vetted by both the ruling class of the Mirdet as well as the Council of the Armesh-Doa before his arrival, there was very little chance that Thelb would be permitted to stay there.
Just tell him the truth,
Lassiter instructed.
He will see lies and deceit like we see daylight. Be honest. Be polite. Ask and we can hope.
Lassiter offered before the temple monks assisted Thelb into a chair on wheels. They then escorted him to the main chambers of the Archmagi. Lassiter had only met the Archmagi once, and for him, that was enough. It was a profoundly scary experience. Thelb was wheeled into the small chamber and then left alone there, facing the dais and ornate seat of the Archmagi. It was not a throne, for the Archmagi had no claim within the physical world. To each side of the dais were places on the floor marked by quite small and modest fabric cushions where, one by one, wizards from around the known world gathered beside him silently. No one spoke a word. They simply sat and meditated patiently, awaiting the arrival of the Archmagi. Suddenly, the double doors to the chamber opened behind him. Thelb looked back as two servants propped open the doors. Then, without a sound, the Archmagi Parab Siem floated into the chamber. His legs were folded as if he was seated in the same manner of the members of his cabinet of mages. He showed no effort in his steady levitation, floating past Thelb without expression. His eyes were so devoid of color, it appeared he was blind. Once directly above his raised seat, he came to rest subtly upon it. He then blinked his eyes, and Thelb could see his ancient pupils. Parab-Siem was the eldest elf in the known world. Legend was, he himself had bestowed the gift of magic onto the humans. The truth was, he did not discriminate race at all in his teachings. He sought only those who were true to the quest of understanding its power to balance all things. Thelb was grateful that Parab was also a high elf. He looked as if he could have been Theb's own great-grandfather. His magnificent age and the massive transmission of magic that had passed through him throughout his longest of lives had removed most of the color from the Archmage's body.
Thelb Karu.
The Archmagi finally spoke.
Yes, exalted one. You are from the Mirde?
He said in a classical Elvish dialect.
Yes.
Thelb replied, impressed by his prescience.
Do they still run the Darbo?
Parab asked innocently, pulling on his long white beard. Running the Darbo was an annual event in the Mirdet with ancient origins. Each year, several criminals would be allowed to run for a chance at freedom through a gauntlet of deadly creatures and experienced swordbearers. It was believed that if any of the inmates could achieve escape, they would have proven that they valued a long life as much as any, and thereafter would be purged of the will to do harm to others.
They do, Great One,
Thelb said, surprised by the question. The Archmagi smirked. He appeared a bit surprised that custom still survived today.
I still remember seeing that carnage. It must have been in the time of Uruzmatan,
he said, reflecting on the gruesome spectacle.
It is still quite popular in the Mirdet, Great One,
Thelb said, trying to use his best learnt classical vocabulary to convey his own dislike for it.
Seldom, if ever, does the convict make his escape. Yes,
the Archmagi agreed.
It is more for the enjoyment of the masses, to watch the suffering of another. To be content, it is not they who run.
The Archmagi looked deeply into Theb's eyes. Thelb could not look away.
Is this your Darbo run, young Thelb Karu? My father became ill. I was persecuted. I wanted nothing but to learn, to heal, to cure such ailments.
Thelb pleaded his case desperately. As he looked back into the focused eyes of the Archmagi, his heart sank as the Magi's eyes turned completely black. Thelb could see deeply into them. He could see stars, and then galaxies containing endless worlds untold. He could see the abyss.
You are destined to become an agent of darkness. Great power you shall have, and great fear shall be the harvest of that power. You will pact with the Whispering Wood. You are destined to be the guardian of the Promised One. The Elders shall decree it so. You will defend the Promised One to the last. To fail this task is to fail the Ancients, to fail everything you are. Yes, I will teach you.